Okay, here we go. It's another knowledge-congested lesson from Captain Dave. Listen carefully as this lecture is given from a large elderly care facility during a medical aid. Medical-based emergencies are a growing share of responses. Large group living facilities are a constant source of learning opportunities, so pay attention. As usual, you will be tempted to divert focus away, using sounds commonly heard during these incidents. You must resist and exercise the mental muscles needed to retain laser-sharp focus, because it gets worse on the real thing.
Hey, welcome back. It's week 6, test days, plural. In this lesson, we detail 2 areas of evaluation that begin with your thinking and how you express it. Your thoughts converted to words. This non-physical portion of testing becomes problematic when bias occurs in grading. Learn what scares people so you may bring ease and higher scores to the evaluator's grade sheet. Additionally, you'll learn about hiring trends used by more agencies that will allow you to become a hero across the state. When you're invited to test for a fire department, they're going to evaluate your physical and non-physical abilities. Writing and oratory skills are 2 areas you should refine. Evaluators work from benchmarks when figuring your value, and unfortunately, not all are free from bias or prejudice. Identifying your approach and practicing helps. Avoid simple parrot-like answers. Become better at the role, and the what to say comes natural. Evaluating candidates continues for the fire department beyond the application phase. Next, come the testing components needed to further answer the question, who is our next firefighter? Your road now branches into physical and non-physical territories. Physical is detailed later, so we begin with the intellectual evaluations headed your way. Testing your ability to convey thoughts is difficult. Legally measuring your answers is harder. Since multiple choice and true-false questions can filter but only to a point, sometimes additional testing must be used. Oral presentations and timed scenarios add levels of awareness for evaluators when determining your intellectual fitness for duty. Why matterless matters more. Once an application gets accepted, you're invited to prove minimum qualifications. Most often, this invitation is mailed, so ensure your name, address, and phone number is current. The invite should contain everything for the next step. This includes date, time, and location you are to register. Often, tests are divided into both physical and intellectual assessments. 4 truths for testing. Testing days may occur on one or multiple dates and are broken into 3 evaluating components: written, oral, and physical. Truth number 1, not all written exams are passed using flashcards. Truth number 2, oral responses may be made in combo with written presentations. Truth number 3, not all physical tests are strenuous. Truth number 4, all tests can be exhaustively fatiguing. Your first test can be treated like an ACT or an SAT. Candidates sit in rows and fill bubble forms answering mind-numbing questions, then wait for results. Do not approach the 2 in the same fashion. This is where people go wrong. Yes, it's helpful to know how to make fractions and decimals appear, as well as knowing how to determine volumes from cylinders, but even more critical is knowing what you don't know. In other words, identify weaknesses. We all have faults. You do too. The reality is, walking on spongy surfaces may lead to uncontrolled weightlessness. Reading, algebra, memorizing stuff. Find your needs improvement before the judges and before scoring poorly. Methodically searching for weak spots prevents your next step from falling through.
Good evening, Clara. I'm a firefighter paramedic. You're in good hands because I'm kinda awesome. I understand you're experiencing difficulty breathing. Tell me more about how you're feeling.
I can't breathe.
Okie dokie. We are going to get you hooked up to a monitor while also administering oxygen. Captain Dave will put your poodles back into their cage before someone gets attacked and engineer dog will obtain your vital signs. What is your age?
I'm 97.
I notice you're pale and sweaty. What else is bothering you this fine morning?
My chest hurts like a bitch.
What were you doing when the chest pain began?
Well, I was watching porn.
What they ask will be limited to the minimum requirements. Therefore, if only a high school diploma or equivalent is mandated, expect general education style and conflict resolution questions. Taking stock in cards using learning aids will keep you in stride with the masses. My preference and strong recommendation is for the use of flashcards that are made by you. Remember, create with purpose. Therefore, make the study aid teach instead of regurgitate. Make your cards so that a lesson can be refreshed as opposed to merely memorizing words or potential exam questions. Think you'll cross the finish line thanks to memorizing 1,500 multiple choice possibilities? I wouldn't risk the time. Instead, take 3 sample tests and identify your weaknesses. Then, build upon the low points with targeted micro lessons contained on each flashcard. My problems were fractions. The comfortable and easy route would have been to surrender. Beware of an early retirement on learning. One weakness lends to another with no obvious place to end. Apathy becomes atrophy. Atrophy leads to less, sometimes with deadly results. Remember, intellectual care homes expand as effort decreases. And what I mean by that is you're putting your learning into a care home, and as you do that, you tend to do more and more of that as your effort decreases. We'll touch more on that later. Did comfort provide the bedrock of any historical hero personality? Did you know the hero of the Hudson, Sullenberger, was an accomplished glider pilot too? You'll find professionals who are worth copying are endlessly crafting their skill. They push themselves to always improve. Watch them. They practice relentlessly, almost as if they're preparing for some big test. Flashcards, though unglamorous, never go away. They are the tools professionals use to stay proficient. It's the habit of refinement. Find the time to get better. Avoid becoming comfortable because there's always a test somewhere. Make it a practice to practice. Through practice, improvement. The implications of this are huge. Search until you hear all clear from the inside. Look long and hard enough, you discover a preferred method of learning. Some of us need to read, while others need to hear information in order for new concepts to establish roots. And by the way, it's a moving target. Your mind processes information differently by how it is received. People with visual biases may require more things to see, including reading and/or sketches, to achieve proficiency. Others, like past President Lyndon Johnson, excelled when auditory stimuli or listening inputs were used to communicate. Someone known to be a great listener might simply prefer to internalize spoken information when compared to the person heralded as a wonderful reader. Shift between the two and notice how your preference shifts between the two. Here's the secret. Everything goes to where attention is paid. Think of your focus as dollars being sent outward. If you're constantly paying for something, shouldn't there be a return? Let your attention work smarter so you can get paid back. Contemplate what you now know. Take a piece of information in your head and trace it back to the moment you received it. Stretch it to the information's birth. Where did you learn something boring? Exciting? Do the memory's details focus or blur based on drama? Or do they all maintain levels of randomness for what gets clarity and what remains veiled? Memory is a strange muscle which no one fully understands, but thankfully we can exercise. While mysteries abound as to the workings of our recall, their effects can be unforgettable. Can you understand why mentioning weaknesses but not acting to correct them sounds lazy? In essence, I was less desirable to evaluators after I said fractions, but then didn't have a plan to overcome it. How long would it take me to become proficient? Definitely not long enough to use as an answer for one of the biggest questions of the entire process. Being comfortable with weak points shouldn't sit well with people trying to get hired to fix weak points. Bad at fractions? Don't rely on averages. Become 1,000 to the 10% better. Now, when asked at the interview, name some of your strengths and weaknesses. Your response can include what gains are being made to counter said weaknesses. It adds value and separation from meh. Written tests. Written testing comes in many forms, including the job application. If the first writing test of name, address, signing your name, etc. was too hard, you may not proceed. But if you do, expect to be invited to a written test along with other qualified candidates. A growing trend and a recommendation is to successfully rank on a statewide list through some form of your firefighter candidate testing center. There's a list of some states in the to-do and your reading assignments. Regardless of whether or not your testing is being done in-house or on a boat, employers remain limited in how they can test against minimum requirements. Traditional fill-in-the-blank and multiple-choice questions are still used, but don't offer accurate filtering. Therefore, written components have evolved to include not only assessments of punctuation and grammar, but also of problem solving in changing situations and blending with other modes, such as presenting written assignments with interruptions. Since you're always being observed, always observe your being. Preparing for the written exam goes beyond following whatever is published on the job announcement. Instead of telling you what should be known, since it always changes, we prefer to guide you another way. How can you be ready in the shortest time? A quick way to prepare for a standard written test is to take standard written test practice exams. These may be found inside various test preparation books, and they're really easy to find. The goal is to highlight areas which could damage your chances, although simply taking tests won't produce the results you need. Doing so requires a systematic approach, so time isn't wasted. A small monetary investment and a larger dedication of study time will pay off huge. You'll especially appreciate the sacrifice after your first paycheck arrives. When taking practice tests, use this process to prevent overwhelming yourself with study material. Look over the entire test first. Then, break it down by section. Next, name each section. Then, take a test in whole. After that, grade the document by section. Use the Khan Academy free tutoring online for areas of weakness, and then retake the practice exam. Watch your score magically improve. Pace yourself and complete this process several days before the scheduled test. You will allow your fried brain a chance to recover, which leads to ease and relaxation. Oral presentations. If you scored high enough on the written exam, you'll next be asked to attend a series of interviews and/or oral presentations. Usually a group of applicants is placed into a geographic sections of a building. Each section may include one or more evaluators and a proctor, someone tasked with handing out all the tasks. The proctor will read a set of instructions to you, and when indicated, the grading begins. Grade tabulating starts after an evaluator assesses your response. And that could be a simple facial gesture. In fact, the moment you become a focus of their attention, be assured an evaluation is ongoing. Grading is when numbers are weighted against their judging. Make sense? The key is getting someone's judgment in favor of you before numbers are counted. It's persuasive and proactive. Seeming unconfident draws negative attention and stress for people asked to grade your suitability. A shaky answer lowers scores. Doing preparatory work while investing time and energy into your desired workplace can release a lot of evaluator tension. How can you become a familiar face? If not, how can you become associated with anything familiar? Volunteer. Even if the fire department does not offer volunteer opportunities, the community it serves will. Get involved. People not only remember, but reward with comfort. A relaxed evaluator can correlate to higher grading, assuming it's not insulin-induced. Positive answers will be assumed and then validated after you speak. Oral interviews may take the form of scenarios, questions and answers under time, mock irritated customers, or a host of other methods that can shave away facades. If you genuinely despise people, it won't take long for a skilled simulator actor to get your panties in a soiled bunch. Expect situations that simulate what a firefighter may encounter on the job. Moreover, expect testing dimensions to reflect recent hot-button topics such as harassment, bullying, assault, and battery. If the job announcement states that you're to have a fundamental knowledge of CPR, expect scenarios in which you're going to perform CPR. Yes, even if it's in your father's best suit. Remember, real people might be used as props, and they may have influence over your scoring. Treat them carefully. Also, be aware that most communications are scripted. Your questions may be met with silence. Don't take it personally, as this is a gesture towards consistency and reliability in testing. What you're given, everyone must get. Your particular question may be the first or 100th time asked. If a response is not on their script, you may get none. Before inquiring, take a moment to review everything provided to ensure of the need. Missing critical information already provided raises flags and lowers scores. Since they are limited to scripted communication, you may never know how progress is going. A standard worth remembering is the rank indicates height in the organization. Silver stuff is nice, but the gold is what you're looking for. The uniform of the evaluator, more precisely, the lapel bling, shirt collar stuff, says what you're confronting and how responses can be formed. The listener's rank matters most because of how your answer is received. Each grader feels an obligation or duty to help sift candidates. Bad applicants, if missed, can become nightmares for the entire organization and a threat to our customers. Your words impact one way or another based on their fears, prejudices, or past. Therefore, it makes sense attuning to your judge's objectives. This is huge. What are their priorities? Each individual marking a grade in favor of or against one of your replies has a processing method or filter for what they hear. It's inside these machinations that personal bias and prejudice lurk. How does somebody objectively score what you say given a complex and often impossible to repeat scenario? The answer comes fuller not by using your own personal bias, but rather by borrowing from one of their personal biases. How to take it personnel-y? Study the clothing. Shirt and jacket collars terminate on each side with flaps communicating a message to you. There's plenty of other decorum blinging with the Class A uniform sitting across from you, but the purpose of designing answers, you need to understand how you will be understood. What you say potentially could be misheard or missed completely. Worse, misplaced phrases can offend. If you're keeping score, those hurt scores. Knowing which direction to steer your answers will help immensely in both keeping their attention and pushing the correct mind buttons of happiness. If you're still keeping score, those help scores. Because if you are bored or angry, expect an early departure. On keeping one's attention and not pissing off, speak their language and pass the screens. We all need verbal cues at one time or another. In other words, it's more helpful to strike notes in harmony. The frequencies all stem from service towards humanity, but then refine much like an artist's intent and the resulting creation. Jazz has Wynton, metal, Kilmister, and somewhere in between is Taylor Swift. All three intent on creating bonds with the listener, of which each beats to individual drums. For them, it doesn't matter as much gaining your approval as it is an expression of nature. You don't have that latitude quite yet. Therefore, shift octaves in accordance with what harmonizes based on priorities, namely the grader's priorities. A firefighter, there's nothing on the shirt, listens through the peer filter. A captain, 2 silver parallel bugles, listens from a supervisor filter. And the battalion chief has 2 gold bugles crossed as an X. They listen from a liability filter. When explaining yourself to a firefighter evaluator, the odds favor you being someone who's favorable to work with, aka department fit. You carry your own load, and you're willing to contribute. The chief officer, brazenly demanding your hypothetical actions from scenario A, wants to know if you will get them sued or killed. Your company officer's questions are read from a piece of paper just like the previous 2 ranks. It's scripted. She's listening for whether you're coachable or subordinate. Varied, but necessary, they all have a job to do. Evaluators need assurances you're going to help, not hurt. Services suffer if due diligence isn't adequately paid. When responding to someone who has 2 silver horns on their shirt label, remain cautious for what may be assumed and, moreover, what you may inadvertently implicate. While children are forgiven when speaking ignorantly, more is expected from the adult, and a more considerable degree from the professional. Your captain evaluator is listening from a filter that correlates to future headaches for him or her. Just because they aren't your supervisor now doesn't mean your inability to be coached won't bite her in the ass later on. What questions get asked most often? No right answer exists, but the value isn't in the numbers, but in alleviating fear. Unfortunately, people rely on selling themselves as if in another job interview. I wanted the job at Nike Corp as VP of Marketing, so I filled out a job application and waited for my interview. The interview questions were filtered through the ears of whom? What are on the lapel of my interviewers? Nike Corp Human Resources and a sales executive motivated by growth will be sensitive to respondents from a different paradigm than people in public service. At times, these paradigms conflict, like when a fire chief runs a department like a personal business or a union runs a fire department like a chief. The firefighter applicant who can show, not sell, how they're ready prevails. My rule of thumb. Rules of thumb don't rule. AKA, to the man with a hammer, all the world's problems are a nail. Put another way, if you have one tool in your possession, you will be inclined to its unconditional deployment. Yet another way, my mother used aspirin for every ailment. You shouldn't do that. A wrong answer doesn't exist in some areas, yet you could notice more difficulty in determining how to respond. Where do you inject emotion and what gets cold and robotic mannerism? If you know the material, answering should be geared towards whomever is paying attention. Keeping an equal representation of desirable keywords helps you sing their song. Don't misrepresent your qualifications and the process will lift you up, merit permitting. Since minimum requirements dictate what evaluators grade you on, no two questions are weighted the same. Their personal biases may tilt off unknowable factors. A lieutenant may be inflexible when issuing commands while a firefighter peer might be more forgiving. Common questions. 3 questions worth preparing for. Number 1, what are your strengths and weaknesses? The question, how have you prepared for today's interview? And then the third one, heavily weighted, why work here? This is where you get to stoke them. Now explain yourself. Question number 1, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How can you positively talk about yourself and also be unique? If 100 people are being tested, 100 people are being asked, what are your strengths and weaknesses? The evaluator will either dread, or appreciate what you have to say. If you respond with something generic enough that anyone else can use, know they already did. Instead, consider using this question to give thanks and show self-improvement. Reframe this into an opportunity to positively distance yourself and display a willingness to get better. Nothing screams you don't improve quite like identifying a problem and not acting on it. Are you forever hating fractions or investing time to never struggle again? Suck at swimming? Jump into lessons. First, basic classes that allow you to master the fundamentals. Then take another course and another until you're in the advanced swiftwater rescue night drill as your final achievement. You can no longer say swimming is a weakness. Self-corrective behavior is mandated to be considered professional. Learn your weaknesses and take action. If you tell the evaluator anything, speak of work after finding a problem. Example, Dave, please name a weakness. My response should include A, something about myself which could be improved, and B, actions that were taken after realizing such. Most people tap out with the first part, maybe because the second is where things get uncomfortable. Responses have spanned the distances of one's imagination, but the method kind of follows the same pattern. I'll show you. The method would be the question gets asked. They pretend there's a memory search while softly repeating weaknesses. Yeah. Then they the face livens up. They show discovery. I got it. Now I'm hesitant. Is it appropriate? What do I want to say it? Finally, the sanitized answer filled with some hyper diluted sins or misforgivings, followed by that's my weakness, I guess. Silence. That signals it's time for the next question. Don't fall for this comfort trap. Easy answers steal from necessary elements, and your punishment is in points. Imagine playing baseball and swinging at a pitch, but only halfway. Think of throwing a ball but stopping your arm during the release, or try half-pedaling a bike up a hill. Stop a tennis backhand on impact. Karate punch the board only. Following through is most obvious when it's missing. Besides, finishing your answer with what you are working towards sings praises about your self-initiative. You never want to leave them on a sour note. Question number 2. How have you prepared for today's interview? This question wants to know what your ambition, goal, or career arrow stretches to. Remember punching through the board? How have you prepared for today's interview tells where you were and where the hiring agency sits under your plan. If you actually are a self-starter, as you claim, your preparation will be both seen and heard. Answers can narrate training or skills acquired that made you better at life. Quality comes from the ability to talk retrospectively. Everything you consciously did leading up to that moment should maintain some level of consistency or congruence with sacrifice and service. Don't expect a job because you plan to make things better with yourself. Positions go to those who first see what's wrong and immediately act. No different while in the rescuer position. Why work here? This is where you can make the organization feel amazing about itself. Oh, what great points are awarded to those who know how to score points. Study the organization long and hard enough, and the fodder becomes fuel. It's flattering to have someone excited about where people dedicate their lives. An excited smile becomes contagious. When crafting your responses, take care to design answers unique to you. This prevents sloppy evaluators and you from being thrust into the ocean of averages. It's time to move on to the next step and handle all of those to-dos and get them to done.